This is an episode you can play in school. Welcome to Line by Line, or what do you mean? I'm not sure what I'm going to call this yet. Now, there are a lot of poems and soliloquies and monologues that are kind of weird for the modern listener. A lot of writing that came out in the Renaissance is sometimes hard for people today to understand, so why not spend today to dive into some 400-year-old writing and figure out what it means? Today is the To Be or Not to Be speech, one of the most famous things ever written. So let's not waste any more class time, let's get right to it. The opening of the monologue. To be or not to be? That is the question. If you're already confused, don't feel bad, nobody talks like this anymore. To make it easier to understand, let's replace the word be with the word live. So the phrase becomes, to live or not to live. That is the question. This is the most important line because everything said after this is based around this question. This is a speech about contemplating suicide. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune or to take arms against a sea of trouble and by opposing end them? The short of this phrase is it nobler to suffer through one's issues, one's blights, one's problems, or to take arms to fight against those problems and by opposing, by fighting, end them? And then there's a beat change. To die, to sleep no more, and by a sleep to say we end the heartache and the thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished. What? So the summary of this is he's saying death solves all of your problems and that sounds pretty sweet. Let's break it down. To die, to sleep no more. Because when you're dead, you don't sleep anymore, you're just dead. And by a sleep and by death, to say we end the heartache and the thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to. Flesh meaning the living, meaning the physical, your body, the material plane. So he's saying that death gets rid of all those things. Death ends your suffering. It does, right? And then he follows up by saying, 'tis a consummation devoutly to be wished. Translation, that's pretty sweet. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished. This is, I wish for this, I want this, I want my suffering to end, right? And then he continues, to die, to sleep perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub. So he's talking about dying again, to die, to sleep perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub. There's the rub meaning there's the catch. Because when you're in that sleep of death, what dreams may come. Weirdly enough, that's the next line. For in that sleep of death, what dreams may come when we have shuffled off this mortal coil must give us pause. If death is like sleep, then what's the dream? What do you dream when you're in that sleep of death? Nobody knows. We're all afraid of that. Nobody knows what happens exactly when you die. When he says, when we have shuffled off this mortal coil, he means when we have died. It's a fancy Shakespearean way of saying, when you die, shuffling off the mortal coil, must give us pause, meaning that has to make us stop and think. The fact that we don't know what happens after you die makes us stop, hesitate. He continues, for there's the respect that makes calamity of so long life. He's saying that is the reason why anybody puts up with life at all. The fact that nobody knows what happens after you die is why we're willing to live as long as we do. I mean, life sucks. Who would put up with this for so long? And actually, that's the next line. For who would bear the whips and scorns of time but not the dread of something after death? Who would put up with all of this if it wasn't because of the fear of what happens after you die? Nobody would. Life sucks, dude. And then he describes death as the undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveler returns, puzzles the will. The undiscovered country, because again, nobody knows what happens. It is uncharted territory for humanity. The undiscovered country from whose bourne, that uncharted territory to all of the living, where we all come from. Because remember, what are you before you're born? You're dead. No traveler returns. Self-explanatory. Nobody comes back from death. Puzzles the will, meaning that no one knows. It's confusing. Nobody can answer that. If you were to tell somebody to answer that question, they never could because you can never figure out the answer. This next part is my favorite. And makes us rather bear those ills we have than fly to others that we know not of. Because of that fear of what happens after death, we would rather put up with all of the stuff in our lives, all the problems, all the issues, all the pain. We'd rather deal with that than take on a new set of issues or take on a new set of whatever when you die. Nobody knows. I would rather sit here in the comfort of my own issues than go to whatever may lie after death. And this next line I think should be the most famous line from this soliloquy. Thus, conscience dost make cowards of us all. That's why some people fail suicide attempts. They stop and they can't do it. They can't go through it. They think about it, they're afraid, and they stop. Conscience. This next part is a little wordy. And thus the native hue of resolution is sicklied o'er with the pale cast of thought, and enterprises of great pitch and moment with this regard, their currents turn awry and lose the name of action. I'm really sorry, what? And the native hue of resolution is sicklied o'er with the pale cast of thought. The native hue of resolution. Resolution meaning problem solving, meaning solutions. You know, as Shakespeare has stated earlier, death would solve your problems. You would no longer suffer, and that is a solution. Death is a solution for your problems, but that solution is sickened with thought. Thought stops that resolution, stops that solution from happening. You think about it, and you stop, which is exactly what the next line means. And enterprises of great pitch and moment with this regard, their currents turn awry and lose the name of action. Enterprises of great pitch and moment, meaning things that you can do to solve your problems right now, in the moment, that would do the job, their currents turn awry and lose the name of action. You stop, and you don't do them because you thought about it. So, to recap, what would this speech sound like if it was spoken in the modern tongue? To live or not to live? That is the question. Is it nobler to deal with all of my problems and issues, or is it nobler to stand up against them and fight, and by fighting them, end them that way? Or to die, to sleep no more, and in death end all my suffering? That sounds like a pretty good deal. But to die, to sleep, what would I dream? There's always a catch. If death is like sleep, what's the dream? What do I see once I've died? What happens? That stops me from killing myself. Because that's why any of us would even put up with this. Who would put up with all of the things you have to deal with in life if it wasn't for the fear of what happens after you die? That uncharted territory that we all come from, and we all are going to, but it's unfathomable. And apparently, I would rather deal with everything that I have to deal with right now than go to something else just because it's unknown. My conscience has really turned me into a coward. And every time I'm about to do something scary that could potentially solve all of my problems, I think about it and I stop. I can't do it. I can't go through with it. I hope that's helped you understand one of the most famous things that has ever been said on stage. And if you're watching this video on your alone time, click one of the videos around my face. If this is being played in a classroom, I swear in a lot of these videos, so, fair warning. Hamlet shirt. Represent. No? Are we keeping that? We're keeping it? We're keeping it. Alright, good.